Today we're going to be looking at comparing decimals. So trying to figure out which numbers are greater or less than based on the decimal place. And this is important besides for just comparing. I mean, you deal with decimals in life, especially when dealing with money, and it's probably pretty important to know whether 9 dimes, which would be 9/10 of a dollar, is more important than 9 hundredths, which would be 9 pennies. So these things actually are kind of useful. So we're going to look at a few numbers today, and if you have your place value charts, okay, I'm sorry, not your place value charts. If you have your decimal grids and you have place value charts, these things can be very helpful in helping you decide which numbers are bigger than others. A few things you have to remember is that numbers that are further to the left are bigger or have a greater value than if you put them farther to the right. So if you were to put a 2 in the ones place, that is going to have more value than a 2 in the thousandths place, okay? Because this 2 is way further to the right. And this 2 is in the thousandths place, and that's 1, 2, 3. So divide by 10, divide by 10, divide by 10. So you've divided by 10 3 times to get all the way over here, okay? Because remember, every time you go down the place value, you divide by 10. So this 2 would be way smaller. So these are kind of things that we have to consider, all right? So there's lining up decimals, and we can use pictures to help us. I'm going to do a little bit of both. I'm going to start out with 2 numbers that I've drawn on my hundredths, on my decimals grid. The first on the hundredths grid, I've colored in 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. So 4 hundredths, okay? So if I write that number 4 hundredths, the 4 has to go here in the hundredths place. And see where the decimal is? Well, the 4 is 2 places after the decimal. So if I were to write that number, I would need to put a placeholder here so that my 4 stays 2 places after the decimal. So you always have to have a placeholder between the decimal and your digit. If it's on this side, it goes here, or if you'd have to have a placeholder here on this side. All right? So then I drew this number, and this number is thousands. So I'm going to bring this close for you guys because remember, each of these squares is divided up into 10 pieces. So if I color in 2 squares, I've actually colored in 20 thousandths. And then I have 6 more little lines colored in here. So I've colored in 26 thousandths. So what does 26 thousandths look like on the number line? Well, or in the place value chart, you would write it and it would have to end in the thousandths place. So I would have to write 26. So if I write it backwards, that can be helpful. It has to end in the thousandths place. So my 6 has to be in the thousandths place, which means my 2 has to be there. So I have 26 thousandths, okay? And here's my decimal. I need a placeholder. So I would write this number 0.026, okay? Now, if you watch this carefully, you'll notice that my numbers are lined up. So if I want to figure out which number is bigger, I need to line up my numbers with my decimal under my decimal, my tenths place under my tenths place, my hundredths place under my hundredths place, and my thousandths place under my thousandths place. Well, there's no number in the thousandths place here. But that's okay because that's the same as having nothing in that thousandths place. And I can put a 0 here because this 0 is not a placeholder, all right? Because it's not between the decimal and the number, all right? It's only a placeholder if it becomes between the decimal and the number. So putting this 0 here does not change the fact that the 4 is 2 places after the decimal. So now I've lined up my place values. And just to help me visually, I put a 0 here so that the numbers are both 3 digits. All right. So you start, when you're comparing numbers, just like you would with regular numbers, you start as far to the left. You start with the biggest place value. Here, in both of these numbers, the biggest place value is the tenths place, but they both have nothing in the tenths place. So since that is the same, we move over 1 more place. Now we look at what the biggest number is in this place. This number is bigger than that number, so I do not need to go any further. The rest of the numbers that come later don't matter, okay? What matters is same, different. So you look at the first place that they're different. The first place that they're different is the tens place. This has 4 tenths and this has 2 tenths, so this number is greater. This number here does not matter when you're comparing them because it's 6 thousandths, and thousandths are smaller than tenths. So even though this number has 6 extra thousandths, those 6 thousandths will not make a tenth. So 4 tenths is still bigger, or 4 hundredths, I'm sorry, 4 hundredths is still bigger than 26 thousandths. And if you were to look here, and I accidentally erased this when I picked this up, so I apologize. Color that in. Okay, if you look here and you look at my 4 tenths, okay, 4 tenths is bigger than 26 thousandths. Not by much, but it is. 4 tenths, 26 thousandths, okay? I'm sorry, I keep saying tenths. Those are 4 hundredths. I apologize. 4 hundredths. These are 4 hundredths. 4 hundredths are bigger than 26 thousandths. Okay, so please excuse me if I said tenths. One more number that we're going to look at. We have here on this grid, we have the number. I have almost a complete hundredths grid colored in. I have 9 rows. Okay, each of those rows is the same size as a tenth. So I have 9 tenths and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 98 hundredths colored in. Okay, so 98 hundredths, the number has to end in the hundredths place. So I would have to write the decimal here, 98 hundredths. And then I want to compare that to the number 98 thousandths. Remember, there's 10 thousandths in each of those boxes. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and then 8 little lines colored in this one. So 98 thousandths has to end in the thousandths place. And to keep it in the thousandths place, I need a placeholder. Okay, so I have 98 thousandths. You line up the decimals, line up the tenths place, line up the hundredths place, line up the thousandths place. Now I can put a 0 here because it's not going to change my value. The 9 is still in the tenths place, the 8 is still in the hundredths place. I just put the 0 here to help me line everything up, okay? Then I compare. The first place where they're different is in the tenths place, so I don't need to go any farther because this has 9 tenths and this has 0 tenths. If I go over here, this number has 8 thousandths, 8 hundredths, and this number has 9 hundredths. So even though you read this number 98 thousandths, thousandths are way smaller than hundredths. So 98 hundredths is going to be the greater number, okay? And the way that we would write this, by the way, so we have 98 hundredths, and we have 98 thousandths. This ends in the thousandths place. This ends in the hundredths place. You have to use your greater than, less than, or equal to signs, okay? So remember, when you're doing your greater than, less than, or equal to signs, okay, this goes back to, I don't even know, 2nd or 3rd grade, the big end eats the bigger number, okay? You can think of it as a hungry monster. You can think of it as a gator, whatever you want to do. Just remember, when you're using your greater than, less than, or equal to signs, that you're eating the bigger number. So even though this has more digits, this has more value. And again, because hundredths are bigger than thousandths. We'll practice some more of this when we meet together.